We should have never let the captain go off by himself. He was just absolutely lost.
Look over there! It's the captain!
Ahoy, boys! You really think I'd leave you behind? Oh, I've got our ship and it's so much better.
This is the Feather Class Sky Coach from Skies of Sordane. It's the first thing I've 3D printed on my FDM printer just because I thought I might as well go big or go home. Now the cool thing about it is it comes separated into little pieces so you can print it on a smaller printer, but if you had a larger printer you could print it in whole pieces as well, which is really awesome. So they come with these really nice connector pins. I'm just going to use some toothpicks here because I couldn't be bothered printing the actual pins, and just to connect all of these pieces together. Now this whole thing is printed out of PLA, and the great part about PLA is it's really easy to drill into, so I can make my own connector spots up the front when it's been covered up by the supports. Now because these are in separate pieces, the seam marks are pretty egregious, because I didn't line it up all that well. But that doesn't matter because I'm just going to use some milliput to cover those gaps. Now this is my first FDM print, and surprisingly I had no failures through the whole thing. Well, basically no failures. On its default setting, this thing came out looking awesome. It just has some rough spots, which wouldn't really occur if you were using resin. But with FDM, it's a lot cheaper to print much larger things. The great part about these kits is it really feels like you're building something, and it comes down to the nitty-gritty details like these floor planks. It feels so satisfying to carve out the milliput or the clay into the shape of the texture. It's so much fun. And now, just to clean up after the milliput has all dried, I'm going to give it a good sand to make it nice and smooth and look like it's one cohesive piece. Now there were some smaller pieces that looked pretty bad coming out of the FDM printer because of the stringiness of the PLA. But by giving them a good sand off and making them nice and smooth, they look pretty good. Mostly going to use resin printers for detailed pieces though. And as I said before, PLA is really easy to drill into. With resin, I would be really worried about it cracking because it's so brittle, but with FDM, it just bends and warps around pretty well, so it's not going to crack or bust on you, and you can put a lot of force into drilling into it. And of course, I'm not just going to keep everything locked in one place. I'm going to magnetize it so these engines can spin and the wings can move. So once again, it's really easy just to drill in. And thanks to the size of my drill bit, it just perfectly fits in with friction. Once these are magnetized in and fit, I also go ahead and magnetize the little door of the cabin at the back. The only problem with this model is this cabin is a little bit too small to fit 28mm miniatures in, which is really unfortunate. However, it looks pretty good if you have a short person sitting back in there. Okay, now the cool thing about the back wings is that they fit in place and they actually hold there without any glue at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to glue the 3 wing pieces together and not even glue them to the main base, so that way they can be taken off. To help smooth out all the pieces and cover that lined layer look you get with PLA, I'm going to cover it all with a primer filler. This is like a putty that is meant for automotive scratches and dents on cars, but it also works great to fill up the little lines in between your 3D print. In total, I probably give about 3 coats of this to all of the pieces. I coat it, give it the sand in some areas, coat it again, put on some more Milliput, put on some more sanding, and give it another coat. You can see it's done well, but there's some stringy areas right in there where the printer was printing over a gap, which is to be expected with MDM prints, and if I was a bit smarter, I would have oriented it a bit differently. But just to fill those up, I'm going to use some more Milliput to make it have a nice smooth edge around the sides. And this Dremel tool is a lifesaver for getting into those hard to reach places and giving a real good sand. I'm just going through on a slow setting and carefully sanding back the Milliput and all the raised edges to make it nice and smooth. And then on all of the areas that are like really egregious with the layer lines, I come through with the sander as well and give them a little hit. And that'll just take off that top layer of the lines and make it look like a smooth body. And now with all of that nice and smooth, it's time for painting. You can see I tried to paint it with an airbrush, but it just wasn't working very well. So I grabbed some brown spray paint and gave it all a spray in that. Now this is like a lacquer paint. It's got a very fine, like smooth, glossy finish, which makes it really hard for paints to go on over the top of it. So I just give it 2 coats and make sure to give it a matte spray of any paints that go over the top. And you can see this gold and silver was 3 coats each, painting very slowly and very carefully. To make the deck of the boat look a bit more like a suntanned wood, I'm going to grab some raw sienna and give it a bit of a dry brush. That mixed with the black wash later on makes this look like a really nice deck. I give all the sails a coat in a bone color. That way it looks like a parchment sort of thing, like some old sails. And then I give the windows a coat of white and then a coat of a bright blue, so it looks like they're reflecting the sky. And then all of the metal pieces can use a nice spray in a silver. And then giving it all a coat in a black wash, making sure to wipe it off the tops and the highlights, and just getting it in the little crevices and cracks. So I cut a piece of string to measure the diameter of the stand, and then I cut that out of a piece of Perspex. I then use a heat gun and a round tube of this prop hammer that is just the exact right size and bend it around. I then add on a little base at the bottom just to stabilize it all. And surprisingly enough, this 2 little pieces of plastic keep the entire thing up nice and steady. And you can see the whole thing comes out looking really nice. And after all of that sanding, it looks pretty smooth, at least in most of the spots. And the spots where it isn't all that smooth, it still looks okay because it looks like just some rough textures. This model is super great and it makes me want to print a couple more of them. The Skies of Sordane has a bunch of cool airships that I think I might need to collect. Anyway, thanks for watching and I'll see you next week with something different.